and gentlemen, we are here with the legendary Butch Hiles and the ugliest man in West Virginia MMA, maybe in MMA period, Denzel Chapman, my old friend. This is the Uncaged podcast. Episode 1, Denzel, how do you feel? Do you feel honored?
Well, I'd feel a lot more honored if it was just Butch in here, but you're in here, so I know it's going to be nothing but shenanigans.
Well, there we go, huh? And that's going to be true, right?
So, I know we've talked a few times, Denzel, but we're on a new show, clean slate here. So let's tell the people a little bit about you.
I'm from West Virginia, Mingo County. Live in Morgantown now. Train at All-American MMA with Nick Brown and Ethan Hayes and all those guys, and also at Black Cat MMA with Josh Fowler. I like to punch people in the face and choke people, so that's about it, man.
Since I don't know you as well, like, kind of obviously you like it, but what besides just liking it, what kind of got you into fighting, right? Like, is that something you always wanted to do, or is like as a kid, or did something happen, or?
I was getting into a lot of trouble as a kid. And I got jumped by some guys, and I was pushed to get into fighting, not only for self-defense, but to keep my dumb ass out of trouble. So,
don't you think? Elijah, what do you think too? I mean, it's funny because obviously I run a gym, but when people call me, and they have kids or just whatever, and they're like, "Hey, my son or daughter's getting bullied. I want to do this," and it's like funny because you would think the last place or the last thing you want them to do is do this, and like self-defense makes sense too, but it's either or. Like, because it's not so much that you're going to get into a fight later, and I mean, you just want to protect yourself. But I think the art of fighting and training in martial arts, right? Like, it does something to all of us. Like, first of all, I think we talk about this at my gym all the time, is that ironically, I think you get less fights the more you train, because now you look at anybody in a bar, you might see the same guy that's 130 pounds, and you're like, man, I'd smash that guy. Then once you start training, you're like, man, that guy might be a lethal weapon. Maybe I'll think a little, it's a little thing. Plus the other things, obviously you're getting that out of your system, but I think it does make you more a respectful human. It's the opposite of what people think. You think you train, and now this asshole is going to fight more and going to have more skill. And that's what a lot of people think. Like, they don't want to put a bully per se, and you're not a bully. I'm not saying that, but as an example, like, they don't think that's the right place for him. But I disagree. I think you get a bully in there and then teach them, hey, here's what could happen, right? I mean, of course you could have the bad stuff too, but if you're in the right place, it teaches respect, humility, fixes your ego, everything, right? What's your thoughts on that?
I think it teaches a lot of discipline, and I think all the points you made are correct as well. And honestly, I'm not trying to sound cocky or anything, but when you train at a good martial arts gym, I always want to put the good in there, because there's a lot of these McDojos that pop up that are just horrible. But when you train at a good martial arts gym, whether it be boxing, jiu-jitsu, MMA, kickboxing, Muay Thai, whatever, you run into other people who have the same passion, and they train. They're in there like you, day in and day out, learning to fight, learning to be a badass. And so I also think that it also sways you away from getting the street fights and all this dumb stuff, because you're like, that guy, like you said, that guy could be an animal, but then you see somebody else and you're like, I can tell that, like, that guy will just be a waste of my time. You know what I mean? And I think that, one thing I told, Keith, when I've taken fights for New Line before, is I want a hard fight, and that's kind of how I feel about, like, street fighting too. Whatever. It's that, I see people and I'm like, okay, like, if somebody's starting trouble, I'll usually try to just talk my way out of it, because, like, that guy's probably not worth my time.
Yeah, that's a weird thing to say too, but I think, what do you think about that, Elijah? I think I've seen some videos too. I think Tom DeBlas posted one recently when he had some good comments about it, but it was a guy, like an old guy and a black guy. And I don't know if you guys saw this video. That's not the best description, but you could clearly tell this old guy had no idea. He knew what he's doing. He's holding his hands up like the Fighting Irish guy for Notre Dame, And the the black guy like walked towards him, and that made that guy all freak out and all stiff. And he just literally opened his door and said, "Get in your damn car, go home." You know what I'm saying? Like, he's so calm. It kind of makes it in a weird way where they both win, right? Like that old guy can still feel tough. He's like, he can say that guy was afraid to fight me. And the black guy was like, dude, I would have killed that guy. And I sent him home, which is what I agree. You could just tell, like, if he had that confidence to do that, that's probably somebody like you were like, listen, man, we don't need to fight. You need to go home, right? Because you don't need to show your ego. You've done it day in, day out.
Well, there have been a ton of instances of like famous fighters having things like that happen to them. The one I think of off the top of my head is Jeff Monson, who's a guy we both know. He got jumped at like a political rally by this older man, and it went viral, and everybody's like, Jeff got the shit beat out of him. But you could see in the video, Jeff was just controlling the guy. He didn't want to fight him. He didn't want to hurt the guy. And I think most pro fighters know that they can definitely do some damage to somebody just off the street, and they don't want to do anything bad. Like Matt Serra, he's ran into problems like that, all kinds of guys. And usually they've got the restraint not to hurt somebody.
Yeah, I don't even know if those people realize how lucky they are, right? Like the Matt Serra one at the restaurant, I think Ryan Hall at a restaurant, right? These were like drunken guys messing with them. And then I think both of them are kind of funny, but both of them, I think, had the people in mount at one point were just like, dude, like, calm down, right? Like, and they could have destroyed this person. And I think, didn't one of them, maybe Matt Serra, like pull their t-shirt over the guy's head, kind of like was really messing with him?
Well, there's even one in Brazil. It's a UFC fighter. I can't remember her name, but it's a female fighter. She got robbed and ended up getting the guy in an inverted triangle. That's what's so cool about jiu-jitsu is you can end a fight without really causing too much harm.
Yeah. Well, that's a good point. It goes back to what I was saying earlier. The same thing, like how many phone calls I get at my gym and they say, hey, do you have boxing? And, we have kickboxing. And the reason is because, if somebody's getting ready to MMA, we just do kickboxing. You're going to do it anyway, right? But then a lot of them, they'll be like, they'll start talking. They're like, well, reason I wanted is because, again, my son or daughter is getting picked on, right? And so I explained to them what jiu-jitsu is. And it's really confusing, but once they understand it, because I'm like, look, here in jiu-jitsu, they can control the fight, right? And they can like mount somebody, for example, and say, hey, man, if you don't quit, I'm going to hurt you. There's an option, right? Even if you took their back and you could have put them in a chokehold, you can still say, hey, you can actually apply the chokehold, let it go, and just kind of scare them. Just say, hey, if you don't stop, like, I'm going to put you to sleep. And most people are going to stop, right? Then explaining that to a parent, they're like, first of all, like, I had to just do this with my mother-in-law the other day, and she still doesn't get it because she was like, well, choking seems terrible. What if they die, right? There's a lot of weird stuff on TV, and I get it from people that don't train. You see that, like, obviously that guy killed somebody in the subway, and that's a different story. The guy didn't let him go, right? So I think people have that in their head, but when I explain to her, I say, okay, what the difference is, if I don't have jiu-jitsu, then I punch this person in the face until they go unconscious, because I'm not going to stop until they're hurt, which is not good. So then they could have, not to be over dramatic, but I could hurt them, right? They could have brain damage, right? My uncle, for example, killed somebody in a street fight. And I think maybe Elijah and I have talked about this before. And it was like one punch, didn't mean to. And he's not necessarily a tough guy. He just punched a guy one time. The guy fell, hit his head on a curb and died. He ended up going to jail for 5 years, right? But that's the point. Is like, that is the only option if we're punching, right? Or kicking or kneeing or elbowing. And I'm not saying it's wrong. It's just nice to have that other option, right? Where you can really control somebody. And then again, we're talking about kids. I mean, that's the thing. Like, you get in a fight nowadays, you're in trouble, right? It's a different time. It's a lot of times, sometimes the people that win the fight get in trouble. It just doesn't make sense. But if they can clearly tell that person's like, hey, like, stop, and they're trying to do something, then we're in a better ball game, right? And that's the beautiful thing about MMA, right? I think because you have options, right? We all know the different scenarios, like, right? If I'm in a bar, jiu-jitsu is probably not the best option, right? Maybe Muay Thai has some knees and elbows. You don't want to go to the ground. Somebody's going to kick you in the face. I've been part of those numbers. I remember 16 years old, us getting in street fights, actually bars, sneaking in bars. And we were the assholes kicking people in the face because we're just stupid, right? We're 16, you see people on the ground, you kick them. And then like thinking back, what assholes we were, right? But that's the dangerous part. That stuff happens. So the point is, it's nice to have that option. And again, people just don't think about it in the ways that we think about it. And sometimes they never will, right? Like trying to explain somebody that chokes are good, you know, when they've seen the Eric Gardner video or they've seen the Subway video or they've seen this, like they're never going to agree with us. That's why they had them taken out. Like they don't understand. And I'm not going to argue with those people. I just say like, hey, you know, I just beg to differ. You know, you're right. It can kill somebody, but so it can punch them in the face. I mean, I don't know what to say. You know, I mean, we'll have to agree to disagree. But anyway, that's a long rant to see how we got there. But I think it does make you a better human in a weird way, right? Like I'm assuming that you're much more relaxed. I know as a person I am, and I'm not a fighter as you are now, you know, I'm old, but like I still, if I do not go to the gym and get this out of my system as just as a man, then I get this build up energy and I'm more apt to yell at somebody that cuts me off on the road or does something stupid, right? This kind of gets it out.
100%. My fiance boxes at a gym here in Morgantown called Jim's Gym. And you know, when she's frustrated or something, I tell her, you know, hey, go to the gym, go box. And when I get frustrated or something and I start acting a fool, she tells me the same thing. Hey, you need to go train. Like, you know, it's an outlet. And it kept, you know, and that's one of the reasons I think it kept me out of trouble growing up was because it's a way to release, you know, all this, you know, anger or frustration or whatever, you know, that you have. Because I'm going and hitting a bag, or I'm going and, you know, sparring with, you know, a training partner, or I'm going and doing jiu-jitsu and we're drilling, we're rolling, you know, it's just it's a good way to release stress. Like you said, you know, if you don't go in there and get it after a while, then, you know, you're going to be more apt to blow up and all this stuff. You know, I think it's, you know, some people like to fish for, you know, relief. Some people, you know, like to cook. Some people like to punch and choke each other. So there we are, you know.
Yeah. It's different, man. I mean, and that's like how many, so what would you say? Obviously got jumps. I mean, did you get a lot of fights at school, or what ages were that range, would you
Oh
say?
man. Oh man. From like, I don't know, from like, I think I got my first fight in the first grade over the kickball game.
Yeah.
And it just went on from there. There was a fight. This kid told me that he was going to beat me up. I think I might have been, I think I was like 16 at the time. He said he was going to beat me up. I didn't know who the hell this kid was. And he was like, I'm going to fight you. And I was like, man, what the hell are you talking about? You know, and I grew up with the wrong crowd. And I hung out with the older kids. And honestly, I was talking to my fiance about it the other day. Other than myself and maybe one other person, all of my friends that I grew up with are dead now. Like, because they all just chose, you know, they went down horrible paths. Once I decided I wanted a better life than, you know, what they were into, you know, we stopped hanging out. But like all my childhood friends, they kept down that path. But anyway, you know, the kid was like, I'm gonna beat you up, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, you got it to do, bud. Pack a lunch. You're gonna be here all day. You know what I mean? And we ended up
Yeah.
getting to a fight, and somebody recorded it and posted it on YouTube, and there was this big hoopla about it because even though this kid started the fight and he told me he was going to beat me up and whatever, and he actually like swung at me first. He got the worst end of the deal, and you know I almost got in a lot of trouble. And he eventually almost got into a lot of trouble, and everything was dropped, so nothing happened, of course. But you know, there was countless fights. I was probably, you know, just because I grew up in, you know, Mingo County there, and right outside of Delbarton, West Virginia, and a trailer court there, and that was the thing that kids did there. You know, it was all who's tough. You know, that was it's kind of the way you're brought up there is being tough. It was never. And now that I have a son, I raise him. You know, I'm trying to raise him in a different way than I was raised. But so, you know, it was, you know, this kid would say something mean over a basketball game. Well, you're swinging at each other now. You know, that's just how it was. So, how many fights I was in, I don't know. um,
Yeah.
when it
Different way of
started,
life.
yeah, that's kind of how it was. And, you know,
that you realized I've got a talent for this.
yeah, like even without any training, when I was fighting other people without training, I was on the winning end way more than I was on the losing end. So I was like, oh, I'm doing pretty good. But then
And
I
so
got
you get jumped. Who was it that pushed you toward actually training?
it was like a couple of different people. One of my mom's best friends was a guy named Estel Vincent. He passed a couple years ago, but he's a real good dude. He was my buddy Ricky's father. He's kind of like a father figure to me. He pushed me pretty hard into getting into boxing is what he was pushing for. And then, my stepdad was pushing me pretty hard. My mom's always been a big supporter of it. So, all those folks were pushing me pretty hard, but it started with Estel. And he was just like, you boys need to learn to fight, talking to me and Ricky. Then a couple years later, I won a rough and rowdy. Ricky won a tough man, just from training at various places. And then I just kept going.
Now we flash for about 10 years, and you're coming off your very first. How's it feel?
I mean, it feels really good. It's something that I've always saw myself doing. I've always wanted to, be on a professional level in a sport. Then once, I started training martial arts, I was like, oh, I want to be a professional martial artist. I never wanted to, I never had the huge dream like some people do, like, oh, I want to go to the UFC or I want to go to this and that and the third. Like, if it happens, that'd be awesome. But honestly, I'm just in it for, because I enjoy martial arts. My end goal is to take as much knowledge as I can obtain and pass it on to others, But yeah, winning my first pro fight, that was fun. I been training pretty heavy with Josh Fowler and Ethan Hayes and Nick Brown. Nick Brown is a different breed of human. That it was just literally you go into the gym and it's Nick whipping your ass and then telling you did a good job, and you drive home trying to figure out where you did the good job. But
Yeah. Well, he's a humble guy though, then, right? Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, which is awesome. Well, what's his? I don't know. Nick is what's his background?
So Nick, he's I think he's 10-2 or 11-2 as a pro fighter. He was in Bellator for a while there. I'm not sure if he still is or not, but he's looking to book a fight. I think he's looking to fight in August. He's a black belt in Brazilian jiu-jitsu. He wrestled collegiately. I mean, he's just an all-around animal. He owns All-American MMA in Uniontown, PA.
So between him and Fowler, are they straightening out your jiu-jitsu? Because I know it's something we talked about a lot. You really need to work that out.
I will knee bar your big ass any day of the week.
Is that what you're working on now? Some knee bars or?
Well, I went down a rabbit hole of knee bars.
There's been a rivalry going on ever since.
Well, that's you. So who went down the rabbit hole of knee bars? Was that you, Elijah?
Oh, that was me. I lost. There's a guy that
failed. He failed to knee bar me the first time we met. So maybe next time, buddy.
Oh, but listen, you keep not training and getting fatter, and I'll keep training and getting better, and I'm going to smoke your ass.
Hey, I'll have you know that now I know the great Butch Hiles, so you're in big trouble.
I'm very glad that you went to Butch Hiles one time and you took pictures to prove it.
Yeah. That's just like me in the gym today. I posted a picture too. I barely got to the gym like a weightlifting gym, right? You got to post pictures or it didn't happen, huh?
Exactly. But now the knee bar thing, when I was training at a different gym, I did a tournament, and there's actually a guy that trains at All-American, Richard Roby. He's very accomplished in jiu-jitsu as well himself. He's went and if I'm mistaken, he won Pans or he got second place in Pans. I can't remember, but he's a pretty tough dude. And we were both white belts at the time, and he ended up catching me in a knee bar. And I was like, I looked at my coach and I was like, what the fuck was that? Like, I've never done that. I didn't know how to defend that. And he was like, oh, well, I'll teach you knee bars and stuff, starting this week. And then I went down the rabbit hole, and it's been, I don't know, 5 years, 6 years.
That's a big rabbit hole. That's good, man. Sadly though, I would say, knee bar is not one of my specialties. It seems like now that you're talking about it too, it's probably something I need to work on too, because it's like people can change the angle so easily, right? You start for a knee bar, at least when I do. and then all of a sudden you're in like a straight ankle or a heel hook or something like that, which is still okay. But I'm just one of those people, like and that's not jujitsu. Jujitsu is like what they give you, you take, right? But I'm also kind of stubborn. Like if I go for something, I want that thing,
Yeah.
right? And that's how I feel about knee bars. It's like, all right, I'm going for them. Why are they switching their hips every time? Which means I have a problem there. But that being said, I'm not just a huge lower body submission guy. It's, something I need to work on anyway. But is that what you kind of found when you're going down the rabbit hole? Are you kind of gravitating toward that stuff now, or?
Oh yeah. I really like a lot of the leg locks. I feel like, a lot of very traditional jujitsu practitioners, they shun the leg locks, but I enjoy them quite well. I learned a lot of nice leg lock stuff from Colin Caprini when I used to train him. But a lot of the knee bar stuff, it was a lot of stuff I learned from a fella named Clint Heinrich. But
He's
also,
awesome too.
yeah, but it was also a lot of stuff that I just kind of figured out, kind of trial and error. Hey, this works for me. This makes this easier. This makes this harder. Um, I've found that, your pelvis doesn't have to be the fulcrum point for the knee bar. You can actually use your thigh if you angle yourself a certain way. Like, there's a lot of nice things I've found that really have helped my knee bars quite a bit. That's why when I get a hold of the Eggman here on this call with us, he's getting his legs going home with me.
He looks scared already. I can tell. Look at his face.
I don't know.
He shut his camera off for a second. He shook up.
Yeah, it went black.
Yeah, I'm leaving. I'm getting out of West Virginia.
Yeah, well, and not to get off on like a whole thing, but I think what you said earlier is like a lot of people shun the leg locks. I think it's because, right, and there obviously people have different reasons, but I do think this is why. For example, I've got some good guys, and actually Elijah rolled with one of Hunter the other day, right? And he's a New York guy, right? And what happens is when you roll with some guys like myself that done jiu-jitsu forever, we never did leg locks, right? That's a new thing. Well, some people still aren't learning them, but the new guys are. So the new guys are able to attack. It's a giant weakness with black belts, brown belts, everything. So what people are doing is just avoiding it. They're not trying to learn it, right? And that's a problem, right? And it's the thing, you can hide in the gi a little bit, right? Because you can only do straight ankles. And I do like the gi more. I mean, personally, I do because it's slower and I'm old. It's not to avoid the heel hooks and stuff, but it does help, right? But if I never go no gi, then I'm also hiding, right? And that's the point. So like my buddy Hunter can come in our gym, who's a purple belt now, and he can tap. I've already seen him. He's tapped probably a dozen black belts, right? It doesn't mean those black belts aren't good. There's just a giant hole right there, and those guys are super reluctant to do it because they almost want to like. It's just ego, I think, sometimes. And they want to say, wow, what I did, you don't need to know that. You need to do this. You need to everybody needs to get on board is what you need to do. Right. And then you can make comments later. It's like that guy that's trying to submit, or you're trying to submit a guy and then he starts coaching you, right? You're already going to tap him and they say, hey, oh yeah, you got it right there. If you just switch this, and you're like, all right, buddy, I think I know what I'm doing. And just tell me after I tap you, right?
Yeah.
I think that's kind of what we run into the leg lock thing now, right? Everybody wants to tell you don't do it and it's worthless. Meanwhile, they're all tapping out left and right to people that are like blue belts or 2 years into jiu-jitsu, right? I mean, so it's a thing that we're going through right now in the jiu-jitsu community, and the guys that are on board, they're going to be fine. And the guys that aren't, they're going to be way behind, right? And that's just the facts of the matter, right? There's just no way around it.
And it's really strange how the Brazilians, like, they almost looked down on leg locks for a long time. And like, if you went for leg locks, they'd start fight. Like back when I started, even my coach told me, if somebody tries to heel hook you, punch him in the face. That was the advice. I was like really rudimentary at leg locks for a long time. And then the Danaher guys all started doing them. Everybody started doing them. I guess it started with Dean Lister, but it's almost a cheat code now. Like you say, guys are so far behind on it. These new guys want to do it because they can catch guys. But then I think that it leaves them behind. Like, you don't see guys passing guard anymore. You see guys avoiding like the hard parts of jiu-jitsu, and they'll just drop back for a leg lock. So I think it leaves holes in that side of their game.
Yeah.
It does. That's a good point. Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead,
Oh,
Denzel.
Oh, I was going to just say that that's the inverse of what you were saying is exactly what Elijah was saying. Is I've seen a lot of guys who love leg locks and they don't focus on the upper body at all. So I think that also leaves them vulnerable in that sense. And I think that a lot of kind of to touch on what you said as well, Butch. I think not only just getting on board. I think some people once they get their black belt, they think like, okay, this is as far as I'm going to get. And I think they stop learning and they stop training at that point. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that definitely plays into, all this new guy's, submitting me and he's only a blue belt and I'm a black belt, blah, blah, blah. And I think it's just because, well, you might be out of practice.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a perishable
What part
skill.
of
Like, if
that
you
do
don't
you
keep it up, you're in trouble.
as a like as you've been a black belt a long time now. Well, part of that is ego. Like you see a lot of black belts who are really reluctant to roll, and I think like they don't want to get caught. And I see that as a purple belt, man. Like getting back into it, like it sucks. Like because you guys are gunning for you, and I can't imagine what it's like at black belt.
It's not fun. Let's put it that way. It is what it is. It's like you can't complain because you got a black belt. That's awesome. Nobody under that wants to hear you complain. But I've had that talk at gyms a million times. Is that hey, like I just want to have fun. You know what I mean? Like for example, and it's hard. Like let's say for example, I think I was telling somebody this story the other day. I went to American Top Team a couple of years ago. I was on vacation, and a friend of mine trained there. So I was like, well, I'll come see you. But I also like, all excuses aside, but I hadn't trained for a while. I was coming off a back injury. Last thing I want to do is go to American Top Team and have everybody come kill me. And nobody cares about your excuses, right? So I didn't come in like, hey, I got a back injury, I got this or that. So, I wasn't there to train anyway. So I didn't have my gear. So that kind of helped in a weird way, meaning I didn't have my belt and stuff and they're doing some no-gi stuff. I just borrowed it. And just was cool. So anyway, they sent like a blue belt with me and I rolled with them. I didn't tap them, but you could just tell that, I could have. So they sent a purple belt and then they sent a brown belt. Now that guy was good. Like I think he was like a pan champion, all this other stuff. And he started smoking me, right? I was like, Jesus, this sucks, right? But he was still cool. Like, and then he was like, what belt are you? And I said, well, I'm a black belt, but I was trying not to have you guys kick my ass. I was just trying to have fun. And he was cool as hell with it. Like they both were. And that's when they said, why didn't you say something? I said, no, exactly what I'm telling you now is I've had friends go in and they've called people even as, purple and just said, hey, I'm from out of town. I'm a purple belt. Is it okay if I come and roll? Sure. Well, everybody's waiting for him to show up. And I had my friend get his leg popped and, it's like, so that's what I wanted them to see like, I'm cool first and then let's work. Right. And so by the end, we're like best friends, but it worked in a good way. Like, and it could have went bad too. That could have been like, if I was going in there and looking like a sandbagging or hiding or, whatever. But let's face it, it's American Top Team. I'm not going to, those guys are awesome, right? Those guys are going to kill me anyway, but it worked out good. But the point is like, it's just not that way. Like, even if I come teach a seminar somewhere, everybody in that crowd they think if they beat me, they're going to get their next belt. Right. And so everybody's giving your like A game and going ape shit. And I'm catching elbows, I'm catching knees. Like, I'm like, hey, let's just go easy. Okay. And then, I'm getting headbutted and, so that's what I do miss. It's like, I only get to have fun with my friends that know. Right. And those guys, I don't care. Like we can tap each other. That's the point. I still want to learn. So like, then I can practice moves. When you're practicing moves, that's when you're going to get tapped because I don't know the move, right? And I'm going to try risky stuff and I got to have that confidence to try it. It's worse as a black belt because you don't want somebody to leave and say, well, I rolled at their gym and he's shitty. I saw him get submitted or I submitted, it's like, that's the part that sucks, but you can still work around it. It's just, and you have to, because what you said, Elijah, I've got, I think I've given out 20 or so black belts through the years of just on my team, right? Some of those people never trained again. They got their black belt and never trained again. And that's embarrassing, right? And it's embarrassing for me to have their picture on my wall because then when you come into my gym, you're like, who's that guy? And you want to know. And I'm like, well, you'd kill that guy. He doesn't do anything, right? Like and I know why. It's because of what we just said. Like it's a lot of pressure, right? But it is what it is. If you love jiu-jitsu, you don't love jiu-jitsu. You need to learn. You have to have fun. And you can like diffuse that situation, you have to not hide. It's the main thing. You got to not hide. I mean, obviously Josh Fowler's insane, but we're old, right? I'm sure Josh rolls all the time, right? We're old as shit. Nobody cares if we're old because they'll say, well, I saw Hickson rolling with people, he destroyed people. I'm not freaking Hickson Gracie. Right? That's a different kind of animal, right? But anyway, yeah, I'm thankful for where I'm at. It's just a different kind of, it's nice when you don't have a target on your back, you know?
It's interesting to talk to you about that because, you know, I've been around jiu-jitsu a long time and you see it, you know, you go to different gyms and you'll see like the coach, especially if they're older guys or something, like they're not training.
Mhm.
And the guy I was under, you know, Sidney Klein and Aaron Goebel. Aaron Goebel is the only black belt I've ever seen that would do this. This guy did not care. Like if he got tapped, he didn't care. I think he was confident that he was a good black belt and legit. Like he would let white belts put him in like deep chokes just to see if he could get out. And like sometimes he couldn't. And they'd tap him and get so excited. They'd be like, I just caught a black belt. Like I saw a guy that was like 1 month in, catch him in a rear naked. I was like, yeah, sure you did, buddy. But he didn't care. Like, and I respect that so much. Like a guy that's willing to be able to do that and like not care if he gets caught, not have that ego. And it's rare.
It is rare and it's tough. And for that matter too, when you're saying that story, I was thinking we've had, you know, because we have seminars all the time, probably half a dozen UFC fighters come in and some of them got tapped. Now that doesn't mean like they suck, right? But they were like letting us have stuff. Sometimes they got submitted. Those people still like, I'm sure their stories like out of this world. I don't even know, but they're probably thinking I'm never going to see these people again. Who cares? You know, like, and like some was sad. I remember like one Nate Marquardt, for example, if you guys remember him or not, but I mean, he didn't really even want to roll. He was in jeans and something. Somebody just kept bugging him. It's like, do you want to roll? Of course, that guy was all amped up and then ended up submitting him. But I felt bad for him. Like he's just like a no-win situation. He's just like, I think he was going to a dinner and just happened to stop by the gym, and then somebody, you know, makes him roll, and he doesn't give a shit, and somebody, you know.
What Marquardt like? I've always heard stories that he's such a class act.
Yeah, they're all super. I mean, usually, and super nice because that was the point. Like I said, he came in for some kind of dinner for I forget what it was. It has nothing to do with MMA. It was like something with medical field, actually, I think. And he just was there and just decided to stop by. And he's like, hey, man, I don't even really want to roll, but I just thought maybe like, it was like a weird thing. He's like, I just thought stop by. I'll talk to people and tell stories in the UFC. I was like, well, that's cool. And he really did. He just sat down, people gathered around him. And that's when he was still in the UFC and stuff. So then he just held court. They asked him, what was it like to fight this guy? What was it fight like that guy? And like I said, that was beautiful. And then we had some smart ass just keep bugging him, like keep rolling. So he's like, all right. Then I was like, man, this poor guy, like, and he's gonna go to dinner, you know, but again, he didn't care. You know, that's the point. Like if a UFC guy doesn't care and gets out there and taps and doesn't matter, I think there's something to be learned from that altogether. Right. And again, and I've seen, you know, even people that didn't tap, but we had Anthony Rumble Johnson, he's still alive, came to the gym a couple of times. And that's when he came when he's giant, like 260 giant man. But I mean, he let people start full hooks with or naked. And he was so big, he could just literally pull them off, you know, and it was pretty wild. Like I still have videos on my phone of that stuff. But, you know, the fact that they're doing that is cool. And quite honestly, that's a great way to not worry if you get tapped too, because if you let somebody start in a full rear naked, and you do get tapped, you'd be like, well, I let you start in a full real naked. Like I probably should have got tapped, right? That's probably like a little cheat code that you can do, you know, put yourself in a terrible situation and then you kind of take the pressure off, you know?
Well, see, I think that's why my coach did that, because there weren't many high level guys for him to roll with. And that was the only way he could get better. So he would just put himself in the spots and just see what he could do about it.
Yeah. And that's a good point. So when you're, you know, get back to you, is that what you do, Denzel, when you're training? To get ready for a fight? Because now that you're pro, right? And Josh, and I don't know much about Josh's new gym or anything, so I'm assuming that it's probably smaller. And you correct me if I'm wrong, and that maybe you don't have enough people. I'm just guessing. Again, I don't know how many people are there now. It's just new. Is that something you have to do with the newer people? Is it kind of put yourself in a bad spot to like kind of get good training? Obviously, you go to the other gym, you know. But when you're in somewhere else, you kind of have to do that.
Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know. I have this weird philosophy. You guys may
he's getting ready to say that he bullies everybody. I see it coming.
I was thinking that before you said, as soon as you said that and had a smile, I was like, oh, here we go.
Yeah. So, I mean, I won't like go all out and just dog, anybody. But
Denzel will show up to the kids' class and just lay them all out.
gold medal, baby. But
Yeah.
anyway, no, they're the white belts at Black Cat are good. A lot of them, we have Joey Thomas there. He's technically a white belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He graduated from WVU after wrestling collegiately for WVU for 4.5 years. He's not a white belt. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's
Well,
a
man,
white
People are
belt.
beasts.
Butch
But,
has got a blue belt over there that absolutely tooled me. So
Yeah.
I understand.
It's the same scenario though, right? Like, yeah, those kids have been, or those guys have been wrestling since they're 4 years old or whatever. I mean, that's
Yeah.
a different breed of person. you
Yeah.
know?
So, and I've got this, so I get good roles at Black Cat. Don't get me wrong. If anybody's in the Morgantown area, definitely go to Black Cat because there's a lot of really good guys in there. But also, like, I don't really like. I'll let somebody sometimes get a good position. I'll be like, okay, you got me in side control, but I refuse to let anybody get me in anything deep if they're going to earn that. And I don't want to. So there for a while because I teach Muay Thai at Black Cat as well. When I was teaching at the old gym I used to train at, the new guys would come in and they would, we'd have a couple guys. I want to spar. I want to spar. I want to spar. They would never wait, to be told like, hey, it's time to spar. You can join in with us now. I want to spar. I want to spar. I want to spar. And I'd be like, well, you can spar with me. And I would get in there and I would like just let them put it on me, let them feel good. And I want, hey, practice the stuff you've been working on, yada yada. I want you coming back. And in kickboxing, I'll still let people put me in some pretty bad positions. I'll let them throw a couple good strikes at me or whatever. But in jiu-jitsu, and that when me taking it easy and letting people work, and Muay Thai ended up transitioning over into jiu-jitsu, and it ended up, transitioning over into fighting as well. I fought Skylar Mahler, like 3 years ago, something like that, and I got in there and I threw just the easiest little. I mean, it was wide open. I hit him with the head kick right at the beginning of the fight, but I threw it so light he just kind of looked at me, and then he ripped me back really fast. And I was like, oh wow, no, this is a fight. This is different.
Yeah.
So from then on, I was like, I'm not gonna, I'll let somebody give me like side control, or I'll let somebody, give me a cowboy or whatever. But I'm not like, I just worry so much about it transitioning into my actual training because I felt it doing that before. That I feel like if it was me personally, and I know people have let me submit them before when I was newer and stuff, and it gave me this like, yeah, I fucking submitted that guy, blah blah blah. But now that I'm have been training for a while, if I know somebody lets me submit them, it just pisses me off. So I think if I was that guy and I armbarred Denzel, I want to earn it. You know what I mean? Like if I submit Fowler, Fowler makes me fucking earn it.
Next time you roll, I'm gonna let you tap me, buddy.
I'm gonna kick a pork chop out your ass next time I see you. But anyway, no, I just feel like that's my thing though. I don't like to let people put me in bad positions. Like get me there. You know what I mean? Give me all you got and put me in that bad position because personally, I don't feel like it makes them any better by letting them get me in a bad position. Like I feel like they should feel that friction. I'll give them a little bit of let them up, let loose and let them work a little more. But as far as letting them do anything, no. That was a very long-winded answer, and I didn't mean it to be.
Yeah,
it actually
really
wasn't. It went bad.
Not really a bully, but I don't buy it. Because man, I've seen you beating up like little kids and women, and like, no, I'm not letting them have anything. It'll ruin my actual training.
I'm sorry that I hit Heidi and Ronan every time they try to get to my candy stash. Okay.
So let's shift gears a little bit. I want to talk a little bit more about you personally. Something we talked about in that interview before your pro fight. You said it was a really meaningful thing to you. And I think it was on your mind a lot even after the fight is Sean. That it was a moment you guys talked about for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. Butch, I don't think, my little brother passed 2 years ago now, almost 2 years ago, something like that. He was in a car accident. Couple guys driving a different car were high on drugs and hit my family. Little brother wasn't able to make it out of the wreck, but yeah, he was one of my biggest supporters. The first time I fought in a rough and rowdy, no, the second time I fought in the rough and rowdy, and no, it was my first time because I didn't win. He fought in it too, and I ended up getting second place, and I'm pretty sure he ended up getting disqualified for slamming this kid, but but you know, he was always a big supporter of mine. And so anytime I would fight, he would always message me, "How do you feel?" You know, every day. "How you feel, bub? You training? How you doing? You know, you excited? You gonna knock this dude out? You gonna, you know," he's just always constantly talking to me about it. And when he was alive, he never missed a single fight. So, you know, not having him there, it's hard. I'm not a religious person, so I'm not gonna say, you know, he was there in spirit. Well, no, I'm not a religious human, but you know, it felt good to achieve a goal that me and him had talked about many times. You know what I mean? It was a pretty nice thing to just, you know, just think to myself like, damn, like I actually did it. I got a pro fight and I won it. That was pretty cool. First round TKO. That was fun. Like, and it meant a lot, just like I said, because that's something that he and I spoke about a ton. You know, it was always, he would message me. It was after my first amateur win in 2015 or something like that. He messaged me. He's like, "You gonna go pro now?" And I was like, "What the fuck you talking about?"
Ways to go, huh?
Yeah, but it was, you know, it was awesome. It was a bittersweet thing. It was awesome to, you know, win, and had a lot of people there supporting me and stuff. But it was also, you know, it was bitter because my little brother couldn't be there. But my son was still there. He got to see me win. I heard him yelling for me in the crowd, and that's probably the biggest push between him and my fiance cheering me on. You know, that I could have for any of my upcoming fights. You know, just having those two yelling for me would be great.
Do you think Heidi might actually find the time to come to one of your fights one of these days?
She missed one fight, and you act a fool. She was so upset she had to miss that fight too. She was pissed.
Now, who's that? Your fiance that missed it?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. No,
yeah.
how do you handle that? Like this unwritten, not a fiance, like, but when I was fighting, my mom would go and she annoyed the piss out of me. She's also passed away. So I don't want to say nothing too bad, but it'd be like, I remember this one instance, literally, you know, I'm waiting for my walkout music, you know, so I'm trying to get pumped up and focused. And she came, was like trying to have me pose for pictures. And I was like, dude, get the, you know, I'm sure I cussed at her, you know, because you're just amped, you know, I'm sure I was like, get the fuck, you know, like whatever. And then but I just remember that I was like, she's never coming again. And I think she probably did and annoyed me again, but
I'd say it's a lot different with Heidi because she's a fighter herself.
Yeah. I mean,
so she knows. Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, when I'm gone for extra time, you know, during fight camp and stuff, she never, you know, complains or gets upset. I'm very grateful to have a fiance like her.
She's too good for you.
She actually just walked in actually. But she you know, she knows like the sacrifices that we have to make as fighters. You know, she boxed for WVU, and you know, she was cutting I think she was fighting like 125 back then. And so, you know, she knows what comes with cutting weight. You know, she knows how much time you got to spend at the gym. She knows like all the road work you got to do. So, and you know, Elijah knows Heidi's been in my corner for what, 2 or 3 fights now as my boxing corner. I can't remember, but you know, so not having her there was it was different. I was, you know, kind of like, oh, what the fuck, you know. I wish my woman was here.
Yeah.
But she communicated with me through text and stuff up until like, you know, when my walkout song started playing. I texted her and was like, "Hey, I'm walking out now. I gotta go." And I texted her as soon as I was done. Texted her again.
Say I lost.
No, I texted her and was like, "Hey, I beat him up with body punches on the ground."
Speaking of which, we should talk about that fight because you know you fought Kyle Eckerd, That's a guy who you were scheduled to fight before. He's a guy everybody's kind of put you two in the same category. Everybody's kind of said these two are the best amateurs in West Virginia. You both finally turn pro, you fight, and man, you just outclassed him.
Yeah. Yeah, we were both I think I was the number one lightweight amateur in West Virginia for like, I don't know, like a year and a half, something like that. And then he ended up knocking out like 4 or 5 wins in a matter of like 10 months or something, and then hopped me on that one and put me in the number 2 position. And yeah, we were going to fight what I think it was last year, last March, and then he had to drop out because of injury or something, and I ended up fighting Jason Wilson. But yeah, so it was nice to finally get that going, because we both, I'm from the southern part of the state originally, and he's from the northern part of the state, so it's kind of north side versus south side. That was kind of funny. One of my buddies said that he was like north side, south side, but when we finally got that going, when because Keith had messaged him, and I know Eckerd's a lot like me. He probably works a lot, and he seems like he does. I've heard countless times that he's a workaholic, and I'm sure that translates to the gym as well. But Keith had messaged him once or twice, and he said he wasn't really getting a response or something. So I messaged him. I was like, "Hey, man, we were both number 1 and 2 fighters for the longest time. We were supposed to fight last year, wasn't able to do it. And I really, appreciate it if you would, agree to, fight with me, and we can see who the top dog at lightweight in West Virginia is, blah, blah, blah." He messaged back, pretty quickly. He's like, "Dude, that'd be awesome. Yeah, let's do that." Super awesome guy. He's honestly one of the nicest opponents that I've dealt with. All of my opponents, there's only been 1 or 2 that have been shitty, but he was definitely one of the top. But I knew that he submitted 4 or 5 people with an arm bar from guard, and he throws it up very quickly. So I didn't even want to give him a window. And I went in, I showed Nick Brown and Fowler and Ethan and all those guys, and my buddy Brandon Swaney, he put in a lot of work with me up at All American as well. He'd come in on extra days. He's another one that's about to make his his return back to fighting soon, and be on the lookout for him. He's awesome to work with, and it was awesome to watch fight. But I told him, like, "Hey guys, here's the videos of this guy. He likes to armbar a lot, so what do you guys think?" And we went straight to work on armbar defenses. I was told not to get in his guard, but the first thing I did was get in his damn guard, because I wanted to see if I can handle his guard.
Well, it was interesting. Calling that fight, you and I had talked so much about it beforehand. We're pretty close. You knew exactly what he was going to do. You knew that armbar was coming at some point in the fight, and when he started going for it, he telegraphed it so much over and over, and like you shut it down completely and absolutely beat the tar out of him. What was going through your head during that fight? Were you like, "This is exactly what I planned"?
Oh yeah, I mean, man, I had Nick Brown, I had Ethan, and I had Fowler in my corner. Can't really think Elijah disappeared, brother.
He did. We'll get him back on there.
Okay.
Once he figures it out. He'll be like, "I can't hear anybody. What's going on?" It'll probably take him a minute, but we'll get him figured out.
All right. Anyway, I'll continue answering his question there. Or do you want me to wait?
No, it's perfect, because I was wondering the same. So I didn't know the background, nor had I seen you guys fight, but it's the same thing. So obviously I was calling the fight with him, and he had mentioned the same, right? And I think he also mentioned, it looked like he knew you were training that, because I'm like, this is what I thought. I don't think at any point those arm bars are very close. Like there's no angle, because and again, it's not saying he had bad technique. It was saying that you were shutting it down, right? It didn't. So I think when Elijah said like he was throwing up, telegraphing him, I think it's more because you're defending it so well, right? It made it look worse than what it was,
Yeah, and I worked with Fowler and Nick, because you always you definitely train what you're best at with fighting, but you also need to train and prepare for worst case scenario. Worst case scenario, he gets me in his guard. That's where he submitted so many people, so. and that's what we worked on a lot. He has a pretty good flower sweep as well. And I worked that a lot with defending that with Fowler, keeping my base strong and everything. And then there he is. And
I'm
then,
not Keith. No.
but I also,
Came back as a new person, huh?
with Nick and Fowler, we worked a lot of armbar defenses as well. I mean, those guys were, and Ethan and Brandon Swaney, all those guys were shooting armbars on me for weeks. And Nick was telling me, he was like, he does this same armbar from guard. It's basically just the push climb armbar. When he comes around, your head has to go down. He cannot get his leg under your head. Like that has to. And so anytime he would go to shooting for it, I would feel his hip shift, so I knew it was coming. And I would stop hitting him and protect my arms. And Nick would yell every time I heard him. He would say, "Head down." He's going for the armbar. Head down. And so having those guys in my corner, with all that experience between all those guys, Ethan's 4-1 pro MMA fighter. He just won his 5th pro boxing match. He's 5-0 as a boxer. Fowler's a really good black belt, and Nick Brown is a really good black belt, and veteran of 12 pro fights. So just all the training those guys put me through, and they prepared me for the arm bar. I really thought he was going to switch to something else eventually. I was worried him switching, if an arm bar is not working for me, I'm going to switch to a triangle eventually. And I was worried he was going to transition to a triangle, even just to, faint me out for a second to go back to the arm bar, but he never did. He just kept shooting for the arm bar, and I kept the same defense. As soon as he would shoot the arm bar and he would fail it, there was a small window that he had to recover. And I used that window to start striking. A couple times I was able to get a lot of nice strikes in, landed a couple elbows. So, I don't know. I felt more prepared for that fight than I have any other fight, and which is really nice because it was my pro debut. So,
well,
Yeah.
The cool thing about that finish too, you stopped him with a body shot from full guard. You really don't see that often at all. And that moment you hit him in the liver and he rolled over, you kind of knew it was over. How did that feel, getting a stoppage like that?
Dude, it was pretty sweet. I was told, I can't remember who told to me. Somebody told me if they would actually put it down as stoppage from mounted body strikes or grounded body strikes to a grounded opponent or whatever, it would have been the first one in West Virginia. But they totally didn't put it down, which pisses me off.
Yeah. Well, how did
I
they
can
label
only
it?
think of one other fight where I've seen it, and it was Nogueira, Little Nog versus Tito Ortiz. That's the only other time I've ever seen that happen.
Yeah, I mean, dude, I'll be honest. I landed a couple elbows on him, and I hit him really hard in the face, and he just, he looked stone cold at me, and I was like, wow, this boy's tough as nails. And then once I hit his body with the first one, he kind of made this grunt, and I was like, oh, there's the button. So I just kept ripping the solar plexus, and then eventually he would guard his solar plexus, and I would hit him in the head, and then come back to the solar plexus, and then eventually he just stopped guarding altogether. I think he there's no chance he was going to give up, but I think that after so many, anybody wants to this to be over, so. And the ref, Chip, I think his name's Chip, he was like, I need to see more from you, and I was like, what more can I do, man?
So do you, as a body shot, something you practice from that position? Like, everybody know, I remember back in my day, it's funny because when MMA came out, they would say body, head, right? I don't know if they still say that. Probably not, because it wasn't effective then, but everybody would just go body, like they weren't very hard, right? It was just so the ref wouldn't stand you up. You're staying active. Now, of course, if you're Mark Coleman, the body, head was a different thing, right? But for most people, it was just staying busy. Are you doing anything special to make it harder? Is this something you practice, or what goes on with that?
So I like I said, I train a lot with Nick, and he actually ripped my body quite a bit in training camp. And I was watching a couple of his fights as well, and I was watching how he throws hammer fists. When he throws them to the head or to the body, he leads down with his elbow and then brings the hand. And I feel like I started doing that, in training we have a big heavy bag that I'll throw around and, just do ground strikes on and stuff because it's on the ground. And I realized like, oh, wow, like this feels much harder when I hit this way. And I started doing it a little bit, when I was sparring with training partners and stuff. And I can tell like, oh yeah, this is a much more effective way of striking. So like, it's not something he actually just told me. He was hitting me with grounded body strikes. And that's when I realized like, oh, that sucks. This is awful. Hit me in the face, not there.
Yeah.
And,
yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. And then I watched, like I said, I watched a couple of his fights and I watched how he led, it wasn't leading with his hand first, and I started thinking about it's kind of like when you're kicking in Muay Thai, when you straighten your leg completely, that's about all the power you're going to get out of that kick. But if you keep it bent and you try to kick through the target, that's kind of the same way I thought with my arm. If I keep my arm, kind of bent, then, I'm not, I get a little more momentum out of it. I'm trying to punch through him. I'm trying to hit him in the spine from his chest.
Mm-hmm.
And it was effective. So evidently I did something right.
Yeah. Well, that's perfect.
You bring up something interesting. People boxing, they emphasize bag work so much, but that's something I used to do as well. And I've seen a lot of guys do it, is ground and pound bag work, using that bag to practice ground and pound. Because guess what? When you're training live, you can't really work ground and pound full speed. Yeah. It's just too devastating.
Exactly.
So how much of an impact do you think that bag work has on your ground and pound?
Oh, I think it has a lot. It goes back to what I was saying earlier. We were talking about, like letting people, get you in bad positions versus, rolling, pretty heavy. And of course, to touch on that again, I don't try to roll like a bag of hammers. I just put lots of, force. But no, with the bag work on the ground and stuff, when we were training up at All American and at Black Cat, I was throwing elbows at people on the ground. I had elbow pads, of course, but they were light. I was throwing ground, hammer fists and stuff at people, but they were very light. So I think that the bag work on the ground is extremely important. And like you said, I think it's a very overlooked thing because you don't get that. You're throwing, what your base and your weight distribution, something a lot of people don't think about. Your weight distribution is when you're throwing light, but when you start really adding momentum to things, when you're hitting, your weight distribution will change. Your balance is going to change. So I think you need that back to hit hard on the ground in order to, get accustomed to that feeling instead of just, throwing light.
How many rounds, just on the training side, what do you have? Like, how many rounds are you doing on the bag? Just out of curiosity, for that, for example.
So I usually do. I would set the timer at 5-minute rounds, and then I would do anywhere from 5 to 10 rounds. And if somebody would pop up, in the middle of me doing rounds on that, they'd be like, "Hey, I want to spar." I'd stop doing spar with them. But usually before anybody would come in, I would usually get 3 to 4, maybe 5 rounds, and then somebody come up want to spar. There were some days nobody would come in early, and then I would just, get all the rounds that I wanted on it. But yeah, I really feel like, I think that more people should do that to get, just like when you're throwing a punch hard versus throwing a punch light, your weight, your momentum shifts, your weight shifts differently, your balance shifts. Same thing on the ground. You need to stay balanced to stay on top so you don't get swept.
Well, and that goes from, like, speaking of that too, I want to see what your thoughts are, because there's a lot of times that people are talking now or interviewing fighters, and Joe Rogan, for example, he brings up all the time where Max Holloway doesn't spar as much as he used to, right? Are you in that mindset? Because and I asked the same, like, I do think, I keep acting like I'm super old, but when we sparred and stuff in the 90s, for example, we beat the dog shit out of each other, right? And literally only stopped when somebody was knocked out. Like, and by knocked out, I mean not physically, not like they would have a standing 8, but then we let them recover and then we'd go again, which was obviously stupid. And I'm sure people still do it, but I feel like we all learned more, right? Like, I have brain damage now, and I say that, like, truthfully, I cannot remember anything. It's like, I have a really good long-term memory. I can sit and tell you stories from 20 years ago. But if you tell me, like, hey, call me in 5 minutes or blah, 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 like, I don't even remember the conversation, right? It sucks. so I'm kind of in that thing. Like I like the theory of it. I've not practiced it, right? And I would think, you know, a lot of fighters are asked, for example, they say, look, I still think you need hard sparring. Max is probably so good he doesn't need to, and he's a different boat and blah, blah, blah. And who knows if he really does not spar at all, right? Like, but I think for the most, like if I see videos with Conor McGregor, I mean, they're still beating the shit out of each other. How are you guys doing that, I guess?
I think so. We have like a sparring day at All American. And then we usually try to have a sparring day. So at All American, we usually spar on Fridays, and then at Black Cat, we were sparring on Sundays during fight camp. I only hard spar for like the first week or two of fight camp. After that, it's more technical, lighter sparring. Because hard sparring all the time, that's just going to end the longevity of your career. You know, you're going to have a very short career. When I first started training and stuff, one of the gyms that I started at, you know, years ago, it was only hard sparring. And I think, you know, like you said, you have, you know, some memory loss stuff. I do too. And I think it's because of that gym. You know, it was hard sparring it wasn't just like, hey, we're going to train today and this weekend we're going to spar. No, it was every day you went in, you sparred, and it was all hard sparring. And there's no sense in it. Eventually, you know, your body can only take so much. Your body will break down, you know. So I think there's intelligent sparring. I think the sparring is important, but I think it's important to be intelligent with your sparring.
No, that's a good answer. I mean, what do you think, Elijah? I mean, obviously you were fighting there for a while. Like, would you change things now, or what's your thoughts?
Well, I think brain damage is pretty bad in any situation. And I've made the mistake of sparring like you did when you started out. The gym I was at in the beginning had that old school mentality where if you want to fight, you got to train like you're fighting. And so you'd see guys getting hurt all the time. You'd see guys getting knocked out in the gym. And then they'll have a few fights and it doesn't take long where they start getting chinny. I think that I heard Joe Rogan say this. It's like you're a sculptor. You've only got a certain amount of marble to work with. So why would you use it in the gym? I think sparring is definitely important. I mean, Denzel and I have sparred. I know he's a liar because he spars really hard. That kid head kicked me 3 times in one round.
Well, you walked that covering your chest. The fuck were you protecting your breasts for?
I'm
worried about those body shots.
He doesn't mind if his head gets hit, huh?
Yeah. You blocked greatly with your face. I'm just saying.
Your head kicks are so light too. I wasn't worried.
Oh, then why are you saying I spar hard then? What are you talking about?
You try to spar hard.
Oh, okay.
Now, you know, it's funny. My friend recently, he wrote me a message too. So I have a background in MRI. I used to work in MRI. I have a degree in radiology and did all this stuff. But anyway, he's a fighter. He's an older guy now, probably my same age. But he just wrote and said, hey, this is going to be my last fight coming up because I have these high intensity zones on my MRI, his head scan. So what that means is it can mean a bunch of different things, but a lot of times those little areas are like, it's basically brain that you can see, right? So like the neurons are going to be firing as well. And that's why they've got these spots. It kind of looks like you can have the same looking spots if you had a stroke or something, for example. And maybe he doesn't, this is what he and I talked about. I was like, maybe like you're not seeing any like cognitive problems, meaning like the way you talk, the way you act or whatever. I said, but those things like lead to depression, and that's what they do. You can look it up, and it's, you know, like why a lot of us, you know, so-called fighters, right? We've got issues, and it's because of the trauma that we take. And he replied back, yeah, and he said, I definitely battle some severe depression. And I was like, well, that's probably what's going on. We don't know for sure, but probably. And again, luckily this is probably his last fight, but he's another old school guy that just took probably more of a beating in sparring than he did in fights, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's sad. It's like it's a thing that people like don't really talk about it because it's still funny. Like I just like I was saying earlier about the, you know, trying to tell parents like, hey, there's a difference between jiu-jitsu and telling somebody I can beat you up as opposed to beating you up. It's almost the same with fighting. I talk to people all the time that say how dangerous football is, and they would never let their kid play football. And then they sign their kid up for boxing. And I'm like, literally, there's like no thought process in your head. Like how do you think football, which I played, and again, in certain positions, yeah, they are dangerous, but like I would never say that that's worse than what we do. Never, because you'd have to hit those certain spots, right? And again, I get it. The NFL is a little different. You've got guys shooting at a missile, crazy athletes. It's a little different. But that being said, that's still only positions like a running back, wide receiver, quarterback, and fighting. It's everybody. You don't have to wait to a position. Every single person, whether it's training or the thing, and it's kind of just weird. They're just forgotten. Like nobody thinks about it for some reason. I guess we're so conditioned that people are just getting hit and like, oh, they stop when they get hurt. Like there's just no thought process. But anyway, it's just one of those things that I think's unthought about, and in a weird way, we won't know until later, right? Like I think you guys are going to be fine. We all probably have a little bit of memory problems, I think, and that's okay, maybe, But I have some friends that are what you call punchy or punch drunk, right? Like,
Yeah.
Bad, like the way they talk, and they're not the same human, and that sucks, right? Why did you get your hand up, or that was an accident? You see his little hand there?
I was trying to change my name instead of impersonating Keith No, and I accidentally raised my hand. But I think that head trauma in combat sports is a gray area right now as far as MMA, just because all these guys that we've watched in this sport, they're still fairly young. But we're starting to see them get older. Guys like Mark Coleman. Gary Goodrich is the perfect example right now because Gary has pugilistic dementia, and he's not doing well at all.
No. And that's why you don't see him anymore, right?
I heard a video. I heard him talking about it, and he said that he has trouble some days remembering his kids' names.
Yeah, that's sad.
So I think in about 10 years, we're going to really start seeing the toll that MMA does take on these fighters. And I don't think it's going to be pretty, tell you the truth. I mean, Mark Coleman just had hip replacements. He's 50? All these guys are just broken and beaten up. It's not an easy sport. It's not something that you can take lightly. And I think the more you train like you're a house on fire, the more you destroy your body in training, the dumber it is.
Oh yeah. I think that, but I do think that, people are getting smarter about training. Like I said, they're sparring smarter. They're doing intelligent sparring, positional sparring, more than just like, let's go out here and just see who can knock the other one's mouthpiece the furthest. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I do think that, you're going to see the toll that it's taken on people, especially the people who still train in, the old school way.
And what's really sad about it is most of these guys, like they didn't make a ton of money. Most of these old heroes that we have in MMA, they're not really loaded, and they're starting to have all these medical problems. It's heartbreaking to see guys like Mark Coleman have to do GoFundMes to pay for their surgeries.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I'll just go on this little sad rant just one last time, because I talked about this at the gym the other day randomly. But one of my best friends was Stephen Bonner, and we had talked about, I don't know what brought it up, but it was the same kind of deal. Is that one of the talks that I had with him when he was still alive? Well, I'll just kind of tell you a story. Is like we had both, he lived in Vegas, and we took our kids to this little thing that was kind of like, I'm trying to think of what it would be like, but you could have your kids kind of crawl around on different stuff, like not really inflatables, but like nets, climb, and there's some games you could bowl. It's just a thing for kids, right? So he took his son, and I took my two sons, and he could barely walk. He's limping. He was real skinny. It was like right after he got over the MRSA that he had in his spine that was all over the news. And then to this day, it's because of the way the videos looked like people thought he had a drug problem, which he didn't. He had MRSA in his spine. He went to the hospital to get that taken care of. They kicked him out because they thought he was looking for drugs and didn't actually even evaluate him. Ended up being in the hospital for months, right? Tons of medical bills, screwed up. He had no money to pay for that, like at all. And this is a guy that the UFC admitted when he died. I do appreciate that they did a couple of things for him. They had some more like awake, and Dana White said some good stuff about him. But at the same time, it really aggravated me because, and I'm not trying to trash Dana White or anybody of those guys, but those guys are going out and gambling and spending $250,000 on a hand, right? And meanwhile, you've got a guy that you're all admitting without him and Forrest Griffin, we wouldn't have, the UFC wouldn't be as popular, and that it was dying. And without that fight, they might have folded, and this guy can't pay his medical bills, right? And he had a blown out ACL besides that, like limping. I was like, how are you going to get your knee fixed? It's like, I can't, I have no money, right? And then his house burned down. Like, it's just the worst stuff that you can imagine. And then even then, like, he had to have a GoFundMe. And that was right after Tyron Woodley had fought Jake Paul, and Tyron Woodley gave him like $4,000 to help pay for his house. And then when it all went down, then he died of a heart attack. He has a GoFundMe for his funeral. You know what I'm saying? And it's really sad. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not bringing it up to bash the UFC either. It just makes me sad that there's nothing for that. And I don't want to disparage anybody. Here's the other thing. If I was going to look at maybe on the UFC side, it's like, look, if I took care of this guy, then I got to take care of everybody. Somebody would argue, yeah, you should. But again, I'm not going to trash him. I just know that it sucked. It really sucked. And it broke my heart every time I'd hear him say good stuff, because I'm like, well, if he's really that important, why don't you do something? Like, right.
Yeah. You're a much nicer human than me, but so I'll trash the UFC right now.
Yeah.
No, I think that if these promotions are going to sign fighters, to these, these career deals and everything, there should be. I work as an electrician. My company, they give me health care, they give me life insurance, they give me all this. That should be the same thing for these career fighters as well. I feel like, it's a job. How much time, I don't know about you guys, but when I'm preparing for fights, I spend so much time in the gym. I spend so much time away from my family. It's a second job. When I'm in fight camp, I'm working double shifts. I'm working 8 hours, at work, and then 4, 5, 6 hours at the gym.
And not only that, but when you get to the higher level, you're paying a ton of your purse to your gym, your camp. You're paying your manager. By the end of it, you're not making that much money, especially if you're climbing up the ranks. It's interesting though, Francis Ngannou, it sounds like that's what he was trying to negotiate for when he left the UFC. He said, we need healthcare plans. We need retirement. You need to take care of the fighters. And they're like, nope, see ya.
Yeah. I mean, I've always heard, a couple buddies of mine, that own companies and stuff. They always say the same thing. Take care of your employees. They'll take care of you. It should be the same thing. These fighters are the UFC's employees, and, any promotion, not just UFC, any promotion, big promotion that, is bringing in a ton of revenue, they should be paying their fighters. They're the reason, that they're making all this money. So, take care of your employees.
Yeah. Well, and on top of that, it is the part that we don't think about too, is like, if you're on any kind of main event, then you are working, right? Because now they're making you go fly places, do promotion, get on TV shows. And, a lot of the top rated fighters hated that, right? Because just like you want to train, you want to get ready for a fight. You don't want to break that all up by having to go out of town and fly somewhere and answer a bunch of stupid questions that you answered for every single person you do. And obviously there's some good side to that too, but there's probably more bad side. I mean, as a fighter, you just want to fight, right? Yeah. I mean, the other part's a necessary evil. You kind of got to do it. But the point is, if you're doing that to help sell the fight for the UFC or for Bellator, for anybody else, and then at the same time, when it's time for them to help you, they don't really help you, it's not really adding up, right? It's sad.
The math ain't mathing.
Yeah, it's a bummer, man. That's what I'm saying. Like, hopefully it's a bummer. I think what's a bummer is that's why I kind of joke about this old stuff, is like, we're always in the thing that needs to be fixed, right? It's another thing that needs to be fixed. Like, we've talked about the hard sparring, people are starting to figure it out. Maybe they'll fix it. Now we're all like talking about, why are you just making all this money off these people and not helping in any other way, right? Like using them up and throwing them away. And that's just not called for. It's different in boxing. Those guys are making hundreds of $millions. And when they lose their money, when they waste their money, like, that's why nobody's sad, right? Like when Tyson went bankrupt, obviously he's got money now. Holyfield went bankrupt. Like, everybody's like, well, that's your problem. it's different than UFC. They just never made the money to go bankrupt. They were bankrupt from the get-go, right? And that's not everybody, of course. That's what I'm saying. Like, I hate to disparage them the whole time, but just with Stefan, being firsthand knowledge of all that, it broke my heart, right? And I didn't say nothing publicly for a lot of stuff. And even this, it's not like, it's going to get back to them or anything, but it's sad, to this day that, they said something about him on pay-per-view, and they had a little kind of wake and invited people. And meanwhile, he has a GoFundMe for his freaking funeral. Like, what would it take to throw $5,000?
It almost
he's
feels
a
like
legend
they
in
do
his
bare
sport.
minimum.
Yeah. It's he went out, badly, I think, unfortunately, right? Not just because of the other stuff, like I think some of those videos made him look bad, right? Like, which is unfortunate. It has nothing to do with anything.
Well, I saw it. I saw that video, and I know I'm about to go out of here. My phone's about to die again. But before it does, I saw those videos. Stefan looked so rough, and I thought he had a drug problem. I didn't know what was going on behind the scenes. It's easy to judge somebody when you just see it from the outside looking in on social media, stuff like that. Like, I had no idea how much he was struggling as well.
Yeah, well, it's bad timing too, because he was like I think during the pandemic, people turned out to be, they kind of fell in different groups. Like, some people didn't care. I was one of those people that just didn't care. I work in the medical field. I had 20 vaccines. I don't really care. It wasn't like I was pro-vaccine, but Stefan was hardcore anti-vaccine, that the government's trying to take over our life. Like, some people went crazy, and he was one of those people that was like, the New World Order's taking over. And that also makes you look bad too, right? When you're like on there, going to the hospital saying, blah, blah, blah. And I think part of that video too, not to get in just about him, was, he's filming because he's like, I'm going to not let the cops beat me up. That's literally right when all the cop drama was going on. It was like the worst timing for everything. But again, not to get off on that kind of stuff. It just, again, felt sad for the thing. And that's why anytime I have an opportunity to say something about it, because I had to talk to, about it at my gym the other day, because people say things about him. And I was like, look, I can tell you from firsthand knowledge that that's not really what happened. And I've gotten arguments online, and I never argue with people. When somebody said, hey, he died, he had a drug problem, like, he 100% didn't. He didn't even drink. Did nothing.
It's strange when you're friends with like such a polarizing figure, someone that's so famous, and like, you see after something like that happens, all the speculation, and you're like, I knew him. You're wrong.
Yeah, and it sucked. It really did suck, because it's at the same time, now I'm dealing, it's different. Like, if I get on my post and I'm dealing with 50 to 100 people, that's one thing. I get on a Stefan Bonner post and I'm dealing with 1 million. That's not comfortable. You know what I'm saying? When I'm like, that's not what happened. And then all the comments are like, shut up, faggot, like, shut up this, shut up, like, I better just keep my mouth shut, right? It's
just not worth it. It's not worth it, because people don't really care. People don't care about the truth.
No. And again, that's the only reason I bring it up now, is any chance I got, to his memory to be somewhat better. But it does come with an important part too, where, people aren't getting taken care of, and we do need to talk about that a little bit. And hopefully, that won't be the case with you. But the other thing is, people are aware now, right? The unfortunate thing with these big promotions is sometimes, just like kind of a music deal, we've all heard that people took these terrible music deals and the record company made the money, because you kind of have to. The only way to become famous is to take this crappy deal. It's kind of like that somewhat with MMA. Like, hey, I know you've made more money in amateur, but now you're going to get paid 2 and 2. You're just going to have to take it, and it's going to be against this really amazing guy that may just hurt you forever. But go ahead and try it, and sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't,
I think people are so willing to do it just for that dream. Like, guys just want to be in the UFC so badly. They work so hard for it. They're willing to get paid shit to do it. They're willing to get their ass beat to do it. But it's the dream. I think until all fighters get together and realize we got to change things, it's not going to change. I think, people talk about unionizing it a lot. I think that might be the only solution, something like that.
It's got a bad connotation, union, sometimes. But if you look at it like in the NBA, football, anything else, they instead of calling it union, I think they call it the players agreement. Yeah, exactly. And it sounds way better, right? Mm-hmm. But they make sure they don't get screwed, and they say, hey, if you're selling my jersey, then maybe I should get a cut of it. Or if you're doing this, if you're doing that, and they can work on the rules together and make sure. So I think maybe that's the way to do it. Maybe have a board of something, but problem, things that we're not going to solve. But that is, the thing that somebody should do.
No, we're gonna solve it right here on Uncaged.
Yes.
Well, fellas, I'm gonna need y'all to solve it because I just got told dinner was done, and you can call me whatever you want, but you can't call me late for dinner.
Yeah, I
No.
gotta go to Giovanni's and pick up my girlfriend, man. She's probably got pizza for me and everything.
Yes, I'm very hungry.
I'm
What?
always hungry. Denzel
Yeah.
knows this. In all
Now,
of our
what-
battles, the only comeback Denzel's ever had is "you're fat." I'm waiting for something original.
You look like the Eggman from Sonic the Hedgehog.
I need to shave
mean-
my head. I'm gonna shave my head for your next fight and come out as Eggman with you.
Please do.
Well,
But
what's
it-
Denzel? How can everybody get a hold of you? You got? I'm sure you got all the social media stuff and.
Oh yeah,
whatnot.
yeah. Facebook, Denzel Chapman. Instagram, D Chapdass.
Okay. Sounds good. And do you, is Josh your manager or somebody else your manager or?
So I
I'm
don't
his
have a
manager.
manager yet. I just run all my fights between Nick and Josh.
Okay,
So-
so just contact you and you'll make everything happen, huh?
Yep.
You
yep.
contact Heidi, and Heidi will get in touch with Denzel.
That's how we
Yeah.
find him, huh?
He is the warden.
Yeah, you gotta contact Heidi Gum about anything. You hit her up late at night. Whoever's listening, message Heidi.
Not during dinner, though.
Not during dinner because Denzel will be upset.
Yeah. All right. Well, guys, yeah, that was awesome, man. I appreciate you guys.
Yep.
Yeah, you did awesome, man. I look forward to seeing stuff in the future. And I'm glad you got your phone working, Elijah, for a little bit. Worked out good for everybody.
Hey, I appreciate you guys
It
for
would
having.
not be an Elijah Thacker podcast without phone issues or something.
Yeah. We'll get the kinks worked out eventually. So you guys have a good night. Go get some food, man.
Build me a studio worthy of Joe Rogan.
We got
All
with
right,
fresh
guys.
internet. All
Y'all
right,
have a
see
great
ya.
night.
All right, you too, man.
Take
Bye-bye.
it easy, fellas.
Yep.